only married you because you're the boss's daughter, my husband," Oliver said with a smirk. His words cut through the quiet room like a blade as I lay weak and feverish in bed. What hurt almost as much was what lay scattered on the floor beside him. The scarves and gloves I had poured hours of care into, tossed aside as if they were nothing more than scraps of fabric. He didn't seem to notice the damage he'd done, or perhaps he simply didn't care. Either way, he looked at me with the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. If Oliver thought he held all the power in our marriage, he was gravely mistaken. Just imagining the moment when that illusion shattered brought a faint, almost involuntary chuckle to my lips. My name is Stacy Morgan, and I have been married to Oliver for 5 years. We never had children, but until recently I genuinely believed we were happy. Oliver was a dedicated workaholic, often away for long hours, leaving me alone more often than I liked. Still, he always made time for me on his days off, and those moments made the loneliness bearable. I told myself this was what partnership looked like: compromise, patience, understanding. We met through my father, who at the time was Oliver's boss. Not long after our wedding, Oliver suggested that I stop working and become a stay-at-home wife. It seemed reasonable then. His income was more than enough, and I welcomed the freedom to explore my interests while supporting his career. I filled my days bonding with neighbors, getting into fitness, and eventually discovering a deep love for sewing and knitting. Every winter, without fail, I made Oliver scarves and gloves. My early attempts were clumsy and uneven, but over time I improved. He once told me my work looked just as good as store-bought pieces, and his praise encouraged me to keep going. I even allowed myself to dream of sewing alongside our future child, of passing down these handmade traditions. When I shared that thought with Oliver, he smiled and said, "Maybe I'll learn too when the time comes." That memory alone carried me through countless quiet days. I devoted myself to our home, managing everything with care, cherishing the moments we spent together. From the outside, my life probably looked idyllic. I was grateful for Oliver's high salary and the stability it provided. I truly believed this calm, predictable happiness would last forever, and that one day a child would complete it. But 2 years ago, the cracks began to show. One evening, while waiting for Oliver to come home, a sudden wave of dizziness overtook me. The next thing I knew, I had collapsed. Oliver rushed me to the hospital, panic etched across his face. When I regained consciousness, I overheard the doctor explaining that my condition wasn't temporary. It wasn't immediately fatal, but it was something I would live with for the rest of my life. With the possibility of recurring episodes, the weight of that reality terrified me. Oliver held my hand and reassured me. "You'll be here for a while," he said softly, "but I'll come whenever I can. We'll get through this together." I clung to those words like a lifeline. For the first year, he kept his promise. He visited nearly every day, asked about my condition, held my hand, and even brought my sewing supplies so I wouldn't be bored. We talked for hours, sometimes laughing, sometimes quietly sewing together as I showed him the basics. Those moments were rare sparks of light in an otherwise bleak chapter, and they convinced me everything would eventually be okay. Then, slowly, things changed. I gave Oliver the latest scarf I had knitted. Our yearly tradition continued, or so I believed.
After
that, his visits became sporadic. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into silence. The man who once promised to stand beside me became a distant stranger, and now here he was, finally speaking the truth. I was never his partner. I was a stepping stone. The realization made my blood boil, but it also hardened my resolve.
If Oliver
thought he could discard me without consequence, he was about to learn otherwise. At first, I convinced myself he must be overwhelmed with work. I kept sewing, planning to give him another finished piece when he visited again. The doctor mentioned I might be discharged by the end of the year, so I decided to make him a new pair of gloves to mark the occasion. I poured everything I felt into them: hope, longing, love, believing they might somehow mend what was breaking between us. When Oliver finally showed up after weeks of silence, I eagerly handed him the gloves. His response froze me. "Are you still making these?" he said with clear disdain. "Honestly, it's just annoying now." Before I could even respond, he placed something in my hands, a pristine scarf I had knitted the year before, untouched and unworn along with a set of divorce papers. Has it been 2 years since you were hospitalized? He asked flatly. I heard you'll be discharged soon, but I can't keep taking care of you. We should divorce. The words hit hard, but what surprised me most was the calm that followed. Somewhere deep inside, I had known this was coming. His absence had already told me everything. Still, I asked why. Not out of desperation, but curiosity. Oliver sighed as if explaining something tedious. Isn't it obvious? Ever since marrying you, it's been one problem after another. And those scarves and gloves, who even wears handmade stuff anymore? They're embarrassing. Then he laughed. I only married you because you were the boss's daughter. And now that you're sick? It's too much. I noticed the expensive scarf wrapped around his neck, clearly not mine. I kept them to be polite, but they annoyed me. Once my father retired, Oliver felt no need to pretend anymore. Worse, my illness had actually benefited him. Visiting you made me look good, he admitted. People thought I was a saint. I got sympathy, praise, promotions, he smirked. They're all idiots. Your illness helped me climb. When he finished, I looked at him, not broken, but resolved. The man I once loved was gone. What stood before me was his true self. Well, I said calmly, handing him the papers. If I was useful to you at all, I suppose that's something. He left without hesitation. After my discharge, I moved back in with my parents. My father was furious, but I felt oddly detached. Before settling in, I wanted closure. I went back to the house Oliver and I once shared. The door wouldn't open. Stranger answered. The house had been sold months ago.
He lived there with his wife and child. Later, Oliver admitted it casually. I sold it while you were hospitalized.
Consider the money compensation. The house had been sold over a year ago. Even if he had been planning a divorce back then, selling the house without discussing it with me was outrageous. Our divorce had been finalized when we signed the papers, but we'd agreed to discuss asset division after my discharge. We had even scheduled a meeting for next week yet. Oliver had taken matters into his own hands, completely disregarding any prior agreements. What angered me most was his utter lack of remorse. You really don't understand anything, do you? I said calmly. What do you mean? He replied, sounding genuinely puzzled. I'll explain everything next week, I said, then hung up, turning to my worried parents. I told my father, I need your help with something, issued my thoughts, and he nodded, Heisinger, fueling his resolve. I'll prepare everything you need, he said with a determined smile. There's not much time, but we'll manage, I thanked him. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope as I imagined Oliver's reaction at our upcoming meeting. I couldn't help but smile. The day of the meeting arrived and we convened at my parents' home. My prince and I sat together facing Oliver. Woe sat alone. Despite knowing my parents were hurt by the divorce, he showed no sign of regret. In fact, he appeared smug, even allowing a faint smile to play on his lips. I'm the victim here, he said arrogantly, but I don't intend to demand too much. The proceeds from the sale of House will suffice. His tone was magnanimous, as though he were doing us a favor. My father's face turned crimson with anger, but I gently placed a hand on his arm, signaling him to remain calm. There was no need for us to lose our composure. Others something important we need to discuss first, I said. My father presented a document and laid it on the table. This EXB explained is proof that the land in which the house stood is owned by my father. Oliver's smile faltered slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. So what, the house was in my name, that's all that matters? He said dismissively. True, I conceded the house was yours, but the land was not. Oliver chuckled, his laugh dripping with condescend. You think you can trip me? Conceded the house was yours, but the land was. Note up with that pathetic. But this time his confidence would be his downfall. I continued, legally my husband may have been within his rights when he sold the house, but legalities aside, his action shave created a significant issue for the family who purchased it, since my father owns the land beneath the house. He could have rent from them. Don't you think that would be a problem for them? I asked, letting the weight of my words settle. The family was misled. They weren't told full story. Neither my father nor intend to take such a drastic step, charging rent or forcing them to leave. However, we're not willing to give up our land rights for free either. The logical solution would be to sell Thelen to the family so they can consolidate their ownership. I paused before continuing. Of course, the family is now burdened with an unexpected exen. They weren't informed about if we have to pay for the land. They likely demand reimbursement from you, Oliver, if you can't resolve this amicably. They may sue you for failing to disclose the land ownership during the sale. Imagine their frustration finally buying their dream home, only to learn they're responsible for additional costs after obtaining proof of my father's ownership of the land. We visited the new homeowners. Thankfully, they were understanding. When we explained the situation, they agreed that if a lawsuit were necessary, it would be against the seller, my husband. When I described the scenario, I watched Oliver's face grow pale. The realization hit him, and in a trembling voice, he asked what should Edo. Smiling, I replied the simplest solution is for the family to purchase land from us. You'll need to compensate them for that cost to avoid further conflict. This way, the family can fully own both the house and the land, and the matter will be resolved smoothly. Ilanet forward. However, you should know that the land is in a prime location. Its value may exceed what you earned from selling the house. Even if you liquidate all your assets, it might not cover the cost. Alternative, you could repurchase the house and land, but you'd also need to pay the family a relocation fee. Either way, you're going to lose money. His shoulders slumped as he realized the truth. I continued. Also, I plan to claim compensation for emotional distress. Your actions caused me immense suffering, and while the evidence is limited, pursuing this matter will highlight your treatment of me. That alone could be significant given your current predicament. Oliver's eyes widened as my father spoke next. Evan, thou, I'm retired. I still have a connections at the company. I've heard plenty about how you used my daughter to climb the corporate ladder. Your colleagues are beginning to see your true colors, and your reputation is crumbling. That promotion you were aiming for, it's already out of reach. Oliver's confidence shattered. The money he gained from selling the house, the respect he once commanded at work, everything was slipping through his fingers now. I saved me. Tone calm but firm. Let'n discuss what happens next. Well, decide how to handle the division of property, the compensation, and the matter of the land. For the first time since our separation, I smiled, truly smiled. I was no longer the person Oliver had exploited. As I spoke, Oliver could only force a hollow laugh, tears glistening in his eyes. The subsequent negotiations heavily favored me. Oliver agreed to pay alimony and reimburse the family for the land. Welliter explained this resolution to the new homeowners, ensuring their peace of mind. In the end, everyone benefited except Oliver. Rumors fueled by my father's network began circulating at Oliver's workplace. His standing within the company crumbled, and his promotion was officially revoked within weeks. He resigned. Unable to face the damage to his reputation, it felt like karma had caught up to him. What he had gained through manipulation and deceit vanished as easily as it had come. As for me, I found peace living with my parents. I now run a small sewing class, sharing my passion with local women and children. I never had the chance to start a family of my own. Teaching others has brought me unexpected joy in giving others the happiness I once sought. I finally found it for myself.